The story begins with the protagonist of the story, the Baskerville family's hound, Victor Van Baskerville's head on a guillotine. He was a loyal hound for the family, but he had been sentenced to the guillotine for false charges of associating with the Demon Clan. As he faced his death, he made a vow that if he were to live again, he would not live as a hound again. Afterwards, Victor woke up in a cradle, disoriented and confused. He thought he might be in hell, as his surroundings were loud and his body felt heavy. It looked like Victor was currently at a nursery, as there were many children there, all of them crying. Meanwhile, the Baskerville family patriarch, Hugo Le Baskerville, was inspecting the children's cradle. He roamed around the room and noticed children crying, and he dismissed them as insignificant, and even referred to them as trash. However, when he approached Victor, he noticed that the child was quieter than the others. Hugo ordered for Victor to be moved to the Cradle of Swords, and his attendant obeyed without question. As Victor lay in the cradle, he looked up at Hugo with pure hatred in his eyes. He knew that Hugo was the main culprit behind his false charges and subsequent execution. Victor realized that he had been regressed to when he was a baby, and that he had lived his past life as a hound for the Baskerville family. Victor had been born into an illegitimate family and had received training in a poor environment. He had been raised to be a loyal hound, willing to do any dirty work that was required of him in order to make the Baskerville family the best of the 7 families. Victor had stayed loyal to the family and to Hugo because he had wanted to be acknowledged. But his loyalty had ultimately been repaid with a death sentence. The reason behind his execution was simple. He knew too much. Victor swore that he would never live that life again and that he would take his revenge. However, with his newborn body, he knew that he couldn't do anything. Being moved to the Cradle of Swords was a good opportunity for Victor to become stronger. Children born into the Baskerville family had to go through one trial called the Cradle of Swords. They were thrown into a maze of swords, and after going through that, they had to get to the Styx River to be examined for their talent. The Styx River was a legendary river that turned the bodies of children into iron. However, there was a limit to how many children it could affect, so being able to reach it faster was crucial. The only way to reach the Styx River first was to head straight out of the helix-shaped wall of blades, which was no easy feat. As Victor crawled through the Cradle of Swords maze, he couldn't help but think about his past life. He had been ousted by his siblings and couldn't receive the effect he so desperately needed. But this time, things would be different. He was determined to monopolize the Styx River's blessing for as long as he could. As he made his way through the maze, he suddenly fell into the Styx River. The water seeped deep into his body and bones through his cuts, causing him intense pain. But he knew that he had to endure it for as long as he could. He couldn't let this opportunity slip away from him. Outside the maze, Victor's attendants were shouting for him to come out. They were worried that he would die if he stayed underwater any longer. But Victor was determined to hold on for as long as possible. Meanwhile, Hugo watched with expectation in his eyes. He asked the Baskerville family head butler John Barrymore how much time had passed since Victor had gotten in the river. Barrymore responded that around 7 minutes had passed. Hugo laughed and said that Victor might die. The attendants looked at him with worry, requesting the patriarch Hugo to save Victor. Hugo called out to Victor, telling him that he could come out of the water now. But Victor was too busy absorbing the Styx River water to pay attention. He thought to himself that he couldn't give up this opportunity so easily. He needed to absorb as much as he could until the very end. But then he started to fall down as water entered his mouth. Despite the danger he was in, Victor knew that he needed to endure it. He kept repeating to himself to endure, endure, endure. It looked like Victor was about to drown, but Hugo pulled him out of the water with a smug smile on his face. He commented on how greedy Victor was, even drinking the water from the Styx River. He then noticed that Victor already had teeth, which surprised him. Hugo asked the head butler for Victor's name, and he learned that it was Victor Van Baskerville. Hugo smirked and said that a very greedy son had been born. Victor, who was still somewhat conscious, thought to himself that he needed to use this time to sharpen his canines in secret. He was determined to rip his master's head off when the time came, and he would do it with his own hands. The Baskerville family would disappear into history too by his own hands. Victor Van Baskerville was born as the bastard son of Hugo Le Baskerville, a renowned nobleman of his time. At the tender age of 8, it was apparent that Victor possessed an extraordinary intelligence that far surpassed his peers. However, within the Baskerville family, he was considered nothing but ordinary, as he did not possess the direct lineage of the family's prominent bloodline. As Victor grew older, he began to explore different fields of interest, eventually settling on the treacherous paths of assassination, espionage, and conquest. By the time he had reached the age of 20, he had already embarked on several missions that showcased his impressive skill set. But despite his achievements, Vicar still felt inadequate in comparison to those of direct lineage. At the age of 30, the gate leading to the demonic realm had opened, signaling the beginning of a terrifying invasion by the demon clans. Vicar, now a seasoned warrior, stepped up to defend his realm, engaging in battles that saw him slaughter monsters left and right. For the next 5 years, Vicar endured through the era of destruction, fighting tirelessly to protect his people. And when the long war finally came to an end, it was the humans who emerged victorious. For his unwavering loyalty and bravery, Vicar was rewarded by the kingdom. However, the reward he received was not what he expected. Instead of being praised and celebrated for his efforts, he was met with defamatory accusations and false allegations. These unfounded claims led to Vicar's eventual execution by the guillotine's blade. Vicar sat up on his bed, realizing that he was in a nursery. He looked around and came to the realization that he had successfully absorbed the Styx River. This was a major achievement, and he knew that he now had a better starting point in life than before. Suddenly, he heard the door open and a maid entered the room. The maid seemed surprised and murmured to herself, saying why Madame had asked to place this sort of thing on the bed of the young Master Vicar. Vicar was surprised to hear the maid refer to Madame, as he never expected anyone in the Baskerville family to give him, a bastard, a present. The maid left after placing a box in Vicar's bed. As Vicar saw the box opening, he was shocked to see 2 bloody mambas coming out of it. He wondered if Madame had sent them to assassinate him. Vicar knew that there were only a few people in the Baskerville family who would be referred to as Madame, and whoever it was, she was probably trying to reduce competition. As the mambas hissed at Vicar, he realized that they could kill all of the babies in the nursery. However, Vicar caught both the mambas with his bare hands. Filled with hatred, he thought that he would bring the entire Baskerville family down with his own 2 hands. The next day, the people of Baskerville were shocked to find the child sleeping peacefully next to the dead vipers. All the nannies who had been on shift that night were executed after torture, but the reason for the viper's appearance remained unknown. Only the young Hound Vicar knew the truth. 8 years later, Vicar was back in class, listening to his teacher discuss the levels of swordsmanship. The teacher explained that if one cannot yet imbue their sword with mana, they are considered a sword beginner. The next level is the sword expert, where one can infuse the blade with a little bit of mana. When the blade emits mana in liquid-like aura form, it is called sword graduator. Lastly, the level at which the aura is solid and the form can freely be changed is called sword master, which is the highest level of swordsmanship. Upon hearing that Sir Hugo, the strongest of the Baskervilles, was a sword master, all the students present exclaimed in surprise and astonishment. However, Vicar was lost in thought and felt the need to regain the power he had prior to his regression before the coming-of-age ceremony. The teacher noticed Vicar's distracted state and thought highly of him, knowing that he had earned a strong physique by diving in the Styx River for 7 minutes. The teacher believed that Vicar was much more talented than the other students and that the patriarch would be very happy to know about his progress. As Vicar was lost in thought about how many years he needed to kill Hugo, he didn't notice the triplets giving him an evil look. After class was over, they pushed him and started mocking him, calling him a garbage van, and talked about the rumors about him diving in the Styx River and strangling 2 vipers to death when he was just a baby. Vicar recognized the triplets as the ones who had stabbed him in the past when he was running away after the defamation. They were known as Hugo le Baskerville's Trident, and their names were Highborough le Baskerville, Middleborough le Baskerville, and Lowborough le Baskerville, all 9 years old. The triplets continued to taunt Vicar, telling him to stop lying and that they didn't like him. Vicar thought to himself that they were going to be a real pain in the ass in just 10 years and that it might be a good idea to put them in their place now. As Vicar stood before the triplets, one of them brandished a knife and taunted him with a rumor he had heard, that if you stayed in the Styx River for long enough, your body would become like steel, and you would be impervious to injury from blades. The other 2 triplets eagerly echoed their agreement, while the third gave the order for one of the others to hold Vicar still. The triplet caught Vicar from behind and covered his mouth with one hand and said, "I'll eat my hand if he can endure this for 3 minutes." Vicar was not afraid, and even played along with this cruel game for a moment. The triplets attempted to harm him with the knife. 1 minute passed, 3 minutes passed, 10 minutes passed, but Vicar remained unscathed, and the triplets began to realize that the legend they had heard was true. They grew bored with their game and began to release Vicar. As the triplet holding Vicar released him, he noticed blood on his hand and realized that his finger was missing. Vicar then spat out the triplet's finger from his mouth. The triplet was shocked and asked Vicar what he was doing. With an evil smile on his face, Vicar reminded the triplet of his promise to eat his own hand. Meanwhile, the other 2 triplets were trying to calm down the situation and suggested that they go to a priest to put the finger back. but Vicar was not interested in that and instead asked who let them go. The triplet then attacked Vicar with a knife, calling him a bastard and reminding him that they were a year older than him. Vicar did not dodge the attack and allowed the knife to stick into him, but to the triplet's surprise, it could not pierce his skin. Vicar twisted the triplet's hand and reminded them that they had forgotten that they were dealing with a Baskerville, where power and talent overcome age. With an evil look on his face, Vicar suggested that they continue playing until the end. Vicar twisted the triplet's hands mercilessly, causing him to cry out in pain. He declared in a low, menacing voice that they were in Baskerville, where age doesn't matter as long as you have strength and talent. The triplets, terrified, looked at each other in shock. Vicar suddenly punched the triplets, knocking him to the ground, while the other two watched in disbelief. The third triplet attacked Vicar in a fit of anger, but he quickly kicked him in the face, sending him crashing down. The room fell silent as the triplets lay there, battered and broken. Vicar stood over them, looking cold and unfeeling. He then told the triplets that they would get better with treatment, but he also made it clear that he wouldn't let them leave the room and they would have to live with the discomfort of their own bodies. However, he would be generous and allow one of them to leave. The triplets were surprised and relieved to hear this, and asked which one could leave. Vicar picked up a knife and threw it in front of the triplets, telling them that they would have to decide for themselves who would leave the room. He then started to leave, but not before turning back and issuing a taunting remark saying that he can't wait long, so decide quickly. At least one of you should live right. The triplets looked at the knife and then at each other, realizing that survival was their only option. They began to fight, each trying to grab the knife and gain the upper hand. The sounds of their struggle echoed through the room, and Vicar listened with satisfaction from outside. He had successfully caused the Triton of Baskerville to split, pitting brother against brother in a fight for survival. In the Patriarch's office, the head butler, John Barrymore, delivered some unsettling news to the Baskerville clan patriarch, Hugo Le Baskerville. The Moore clan had been causing trouble in the Ruby Mines, claiming it as their territory. However, Patriarch Hugo assured John that they would handle the matter when the Moore clan reached out to them. John then reported on the interim evaluation of the juvenile fortress and informed the Patriarch that Master Vicar had scored the highest on the written exam. The practical exam was scheduled in 5 days, and the Guardian Knights had vacated the premises in preparation. However, John hesitated before informing the Patriarch of a recent incident at the juvenile fortress. John informed the Patriarch that there had been a big fight amongst the young masters at the fortress. Patriarch Hugo was concerned and asked how many of them had died. Butler John informed Hugo that there were no casualties, but Master Highborough's teeth had been completely damaged. Master Midleborough's jaw had been smashed in, and Master Lowborough's left index finger had been amputated. While they had recovered their health since being treated, the psychological damage done to them seemed significant. Patriarch Hugo was taken aback and remarked that they wouldn't have fought amongst themselves since they were so close. John then revealed that there was some friction with another young master, an 8-year-old named Master Vicar, who had wounded the 3 young masters and who also had the highest scores on the written exam. After Patriarch Hugo expressed his concern about the incident at the juvenile fortress, he summoned Vicar to his office. Vicar arrived with a smile on his face, and Patriarch Hugo commented on how much he had grown since they last met. Patriarch Hugo then brought up the issue of Vicar disabling the 9-year-old triplets in his senior class. Vicar responded that the brothers had received proper medical treatment since then. However, Patriarch Hugo pointed out that he was not talking about physical disabilities, but the disability of the heart. He explained how the incident had torn the brothers' relationship apart, and asked Vicar if he thought what he did was wrong. To this, Vicar responded with a question of his own, asking what did he do wrong. Patriarch Hugo pointed out that he had turned his brothers into a total mess. Vicar, with a confident look in his crimson eyes, replied that he was stronger, and how could the stronger person be wrong? Patriarch Hugo then revealed Vicar's brothers had forgiven him, yet he still didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Vicar seemed surprised by this news and asked they forgave me. Vicar suddenly recalled a memory before his regression. The youngest daughter of a family that was ruined by the Baskerville clan came to pay Hugo a visit. She had become a nun after many years, and she forgave Hugo despite his clan being responsible for the ruin of her family. Vicar repeated the same line that Hugo had said to the nun, that forgiveness is an excuse made by the weak who cannot seek revenge due to their lack of strength. As Vicar talked about the importance of strength, Hugo showed his approval by nodding and his eyes glowing with agreement. He then turned to the head butler, Barrymore, and instructed him to allow Vicar to take any snack he wanted from the food storage, enough for him to carry on his own. Vicar expressed his gratitude by requesting chocolates. As Vicar was leaving with head butler, Hugo addressed him as his son, urging him to perform well on the upcoming evaluation and not to lose to the direct descendants. Victor acknowledged the advice, but his face was filled with hatred. Victor and head butler made their way to the storage room. The head butler began to inform him about the chocolate. He explained that it was the highest quality chocolate that the Morg clan had obtained with much difficulty, and that it was enjoyed by their gourmands. However, Victor quickly interrupted him and stated that he didn't want anything that was processed. The head butler was taken aback by this and asked for clarification. Victor then requested cacao beans, ones that had a rich aroma. The head butler was confused but complied and had the beans brought to Victor. As Victor put one of the beans in his mouth, the chef informed him that they were the bloody beans known for their rich aroma, and that with just one bean, he could produce 100 liters of chocolate. The head butler watched as Victor ate the bitter bean, and thought to himself that Victor must really love chocolate to eat something so bitter on its own. And this was a good method to obtain more chocolate, as after being processed he would have a huge amount of chocolate available. The chef asked Victor if he wanted them to process the beans and send them to his room, but Victor declined and said he would take them as is. The head butler was left wondering if Victor just had peculiar tastes. Victor had no interest in eating the chocolate, but he had a plan for the cacao beans. Victor planned to use the beans in the upcoming practical exam in 5 days. Little did they know, a catastrophic event would soon occur, unlike anything that had ever happened before in the Baskerville clan's history. In this world, the Baskerville family is known as the Berserker family due to the intense training and evaluation that their children undergo from a young age. The training begins when the children are able to take their first steps, and they are immediately put through a rigorous test of their stamina. They must run up a steep mountain and are not allowed to lie down or rest on their stomachs except for allocated times. As if this wasn't enough, when it's time for them to sleep, they are required to sleep alongside a monster corpse. This is to help them adjust to tough environments and become resilient in the face of danger. These extreme practices are what make the Baskerville family feared and respected throughout the land. After this period of grueling training, the children reach the age of 8, and the real test begins. The young hounds, as they are called, must undergo a deadly evaluation. This is the defining moment that has earned the Baskerville family its notorious reputation. Now, on the outskirts of the territory, there is a mountain known as the La Rougette La Noire Mountain. It is filled with monsters, and it is here that the young hounds gather to undergo their evaluation. The instructor of the Baskerville family, Shadow Dog Pavlov van Baskerville, stood before the young masters and explained the rules of the test. They needed to survive for a month in the area and hunt large and strong monsters. He went on to explain that the points for being successful in surviving were 10 points, and if the young masters survived without becoming disabled, it was 30 points. If they failed other young masters and survived, it was 50 points. If they defeated a monster and survived, it was 70 points. And if they fulfilled all the above conditions, they would receive 90 points. Pavlov also told the young masters that if they stole the badge that was given to them from someone else, additional points would be given. However, if they died, they would receive 0 points. He emphasized that there were no 100 points and reminded them of Sir Hugo's lesson that a swordsman dies the moment they become arrogant. The instructor also cautioned against leaving the designated area, as La Rougette La Noire Mountain was a restricted area with many undiscovered things. He recommended that the young masters move within the given space where the monsters had already been subjugated. He informed them that during the exam, shadow dogs would be hiding and grading them. As the young masters waited for the start of the practical exam, some of them noticed Victor and began discussing his past feats. Despite their comments, Victor remained composed and thought about the La Rougette La Noire Mountain, which he had visited before. Meanwhile, the triplets standing near Victor were visibly nervous, sweating with fear. Shadow Dog Pavlov addressed the young masters, wishing them good luck before the bell rang, signaling the start of the exam. As soon as the bell rang, all the young masters started running towards different parts of the mountain to occupy advantageous areas. One of the young masters had a plan and thought about going to a place he had seen in the last year's exam, hoping to gain an edge. The young master behind him thought he could not survive alone and decided to follow him, with the intention of taking it from him. Meanwhile, the triplets were arguing amongst themselves, each wanting to do things their own way and come out on top. Shadow Dog Pavlov observed as the exam began, knowing that it was important to keep casualties to a minimum. Although killing was not prohibited, it was discouraged, and any contestant who did kill would have points deducted. Pavlov and the other shadow dogs were determined to do their best to prevent any unnecessary deaths. One of the shadow dogs that was assigned to follow Vikir was surprised to see him heading towards a restricted area. He wondered where Vikir was going and if he was the rumored genius who had distinguished himself since childhood. The shadow dog was intrigued and looked forward to seeing the skills Vikir would display. Vikir approached a large tree and wondered if this was the right spot. He thought that the soft ground would be suitable for him to set up camp for a while. Vikir then considered taking a break, which left the shadow dog following him confused. While other participants were busy fighting each other for points or facing monsters, Vikir gathered wood and practiced with a wooden stick. Later on, he slept peacefully under the tree. The shadow dog who had been watching Vikir grew impatient and started to question his actions. He wondered how long it had been since Vikir had taken a break and observed that he spent most of his time digging holes, hunting for food, or collecting equipment. The shadow dog started to doubt the rumors about Vikir's supposed genius, wondering if he was planning on hiding instead of actively participating in the exam. At last, the shadow dog decided to leave and find something interesting elsewhere. As soon as the shadow dog left, Vikir's face lit up with a smile. He was happy that he could finally relax and thought to himself that camping outside reminded him of the old days. Vikir recalled a conversation with his group mate about using cacao beans to make fish smell less fishy. He threw some bloody beans into the fire and remarked that the interfering shadow dog was finally gone and he had finished all his preparations. He wondered if he should start his hunt now. A few days later, Vikir entered the restricted area and recognized it from his scouting days. As he was roaming around, he noticed a burning smell and burnt tree roots. He knew that the habitat of the monster he was looking for was around there. Suddenly, he spotted burning stool and realized that he had found it. There was only one monster around there that produced that kind of dropping, a hellhound. The hellhound stood in front of Vikir with flame erupting from its mouth. The hellhound was a dog from hell that brought horrific disasters to those who encountered it. It had a risk rating of B+ and was 3 meters in size. Its sulfuric flames that came out of its mouth and eyes were extremely gaseous and could trigger sparks. If it bit someone, they could not survive. The living things used as firewood would burn and not go out until they completely disappeared. Vikir knew that he was in trouble when he saw the towering figure of the lookout monster that swallowed the hellfires of the oil world, the hellhound. The beast was known to be one of the most dangerous monsters in the land, and Vikir had barely survived his encounter with one when he was just 18 years old in his past life. Now, as an 8-year-old, Vikir knew that it would be impossible for him to defeat the hellhound alone. But he remembered a way to take on the beast that even a child could manage. As the hellhound lunged towards him, Vikir quickly dodged to the side, remembering the first weakness of hellhounds. They could only move in straight lines. They found it difficult to suddenly change directions. Vikir quickly dropped some water on the ground, and as the hellhound charged towards him, he shouted out the second weakness of lookout monsters. They were unable to cross water. Because of the water Vikir dropped, the hellhound took a longer route to reach Vikir, giving him more time to dodge. Vikir knew that even a shallow depth of water could slow them down significantly, exposing the weakness common to all canine monsters, opening their mouth while running. Vikir found himself in another life-threatening situation as the bloodthirsty hellhound attacked him. But Vikir was prepared, and he threw a bloody bean into the monster's mouth. After landing, the hellhound suddenly started to whimper in pain and become unable to move. Vikir explained that chocolate was poison to canines, and with the bloody bean's power to make 100 liters of chocolate with just one bean, it was obvious what it would do to a canine monster like the hellhound. He drew his sword and aimed for the hellhound's weak spot where the ribs were not present, the kidney. With a swift and decisive strike, Vikir pierced the hellhound's kidney, killing it easily. As he absorbed the energy called XP or karma from the defeated monster, Vikir felt his body getting stronger. He swung his sword and felt it becoming lighter, knowing that he was catching up to where he was before his regression before he even reached the age of 15. Vikir couldn't help but wonder what kind of expression Hugo would make when he brought back a monster with a risk rating of B+ as an 8-year-old child. Vikir stood there, ready to take the head of the hellhound he had just defeated, feeling confident in his abilities. He knew he had already secured first place in the practical test, and was eager to claim his reward, something he never would have dreamed of in his past life. But his moment of triumph was short-lived as a group of hellhounds approached him, likely seeking revenge for their fallen comrade. Vikir remained calm and collected, already knowing the weaknesses of these creatures and how to defeat them. As the hellhounds drew nearer, Vikir took out his sword and prepared to take them on. He had plenty of bloody beans left and was ready to use them to his advantage. With a smirk on his face, he cut the dead hellhound's head and taunted the hellhounds, knowing they were no match for his skills and knowledge. He had already defeated one of their kind and was prepared to take them all down. The hellhound suddenly started whimpering, which immediately caught Victor's attention. He couldn't believe that the fierce beasts were feeling scared of a mere 8-year-old's bloodthirst. Hellhounds would never submit to their prey even if they were to die. Victor thought to himself, trying to figure out what could have caused the hellhounds to feel so uneasy. As Victor turned around, he saw a monstrous creature with 3 heads standing before him. It was a Cerberus, the legendary 3-headed dog from Greek mythology. The creature was massive, measuring at least 7 meters in size, and Victor knew that a Cerberus had a risk rating of a+. Victor was bewildered as to what a Cerberus, which typically inhabited the 7th ridge of the La Rouge et Lenoir mountain, was doing here. The Cerberus was known as the ultimate lookout monster, residing in a place where all the dead spirits were headed. Victor noticed that the Cerberus was bleeding and had multiple arrows stuck in its body. He realized that someone might have been hunting it, and it had come all the way to this place being chased. This was his chance to kill and injure a +rank monster, and he decided to attack the Cerberus. Despite the Cerberus being a powerful and dangerous creature, Victor had been hiding his true abilities as a sword expert and had already reached a high level of expertise. His body had been strengthened by the river Styx, and all the weapons he possessed were working well against the injured Cerberus. With his refined swordsmanship, which he had developed through wars with the demon clans, he successfully landed some hits on the Cerberus. Victor thought that he could do it, as an injured Cerberus was doable. Victor's attack on the Cerberus seemed to be working, and he thought he had a chance of defeating the injured +rank monster. However, in a moment of carelessness, Victor let his guard down, allowing the Cerberus to strike back with its claws. The first attack broke Victor's sword, and the second sent him flying through the air. The force of the Cerberus's attack sent Victor hurtling towards a tree trunk. With a sickening thud, he smashed into the tree trunk, and blood poured from his mouth. The impact had clearly caused a serious injury, and Victor lay still, his body broken and unmoving. Victor's eyes opened slowly and a surge of panic rushed through him as he remembered the direct attack of the Cerberus and felt a sharp pain in his left arm. He wondered if the beast had ripped his arm off in the attack, but when he looked down, he saw that it was still attached to his body, with some injuries. Victor was relieved that the Cerberus was wounded and had not managed to sever his arm completely. He thought about the river Styx and how its magical properties might have played a role in protecting him from the beast's full force. He felt grateful for its protection but knew he couldn't rely on it completely. His relief was short-lived, however, as he quickly realized that the damage was still significant. He knew he wouldn't be able to take another hit from the Cerberus, and so he dodged as the beast attacked him once again. As an experienced hunter, he knew that he had to find the best way out of situations like this. The best possible decision right now was to run, with his tail tucked between his legs. As he ran, Victor's mind raced with thoughts of survival. He knew that he had to find a way out of this situation, and fast. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape route. That's when he saw it, an iron fence just a few yards away. Victor's heart leaped with hope. He knew that if he could get past that fence, he would be out of the restricted area and closer to safety. He pushed himself harder, running with all his might. With a burst of adrenaline, Victor pushed himself through the gate, his heart pounding with relief. He had made it out of the restricted area, but he knew that he was not out of danger yet. He had to reach that place, the safe haven he had prepared for himself before embarking on this dangerous mission. As he ran, he searched for something in the woods nearby, his heart racing with the fear of being caught by the hellhound. Finally, he spotted what he was looking for, a pit he had prepared beforehand. He jumped forward, narrowly avoiding Cerberus's jaws, and the hellhound fell into the pit full of wooden spears. Victor couldn't help but smile to himself, knowing that he had prepared well for this battle. He had smeared the wooden spears with the bloody bean essence that acted as poison for the canid monsters. Cerberus growled and foam started oozing from its mouth, but Victor remained focused and prepared for the next phase of the battle. He knew that Cerberus was a high-ranking demon and that this fight would be one of the toughest of his life. Victor prepared a wooden spear and he threw it at Cerberus, hitting the hellhound's side. But the Cerberus was still alive and walking towards him, ready to attack. Victor counted the hellhound's steps as it approached him, one by one. As soon as Cerberus took the 7th step, it stopped abruptly, falling to the ground right in front of Victor. Victor let out a sigh of relief, realizing that the rumors were true. The wooden spear he had just thrown was not like the others. It was a spear laced with the venomous fang of the deadly bloody mamba snake that prevented its victim from walking more than 7 steps once they were bitten. Vicar had hidden it away when he was younger, knowing that it could come in handy one day. The energy emanating from Cerberus' body entered Vicar as he stood over the 3 lifeless heads of the beast. He marveled at the power he now possessed, but his mind quickly turned to the concern of how he was going to transport the massive body back. He knew that the cause of the Cerberus' death would be obvious to anyone who saw it, and he began to consider who might be his witness. Perhaps the guardian knight who had seen him carving the wooden spears could be of help. But then, Vicar's thoughts turned to something else entirely. The Cerberus was a gatekeeper, which meant that it was guarding something. A dungeon, most likely, that could be nearby. Vicar's heart quickened at the thought of the treasure that might be hidden within. He knew that dungeons were often the lairs of powerful monsters. Vicar was determined to explore the dungeon, but before going there he took a handful of Cerberus feces and applied it to his body. Vicar knew that by doing this, he could avoid any small monsters that might be lurking in his path. Vicar's keen senses were on full display as he tracked the steps of the Cerberus through the forest. He noted the dried soil, the rotten leaves, and the moist roots, following the trail with a single-minded focus. As he backtracked the path, his eyes widened in recognition. This was the dungeon that the Cerberus had been guarding, and Vicar realized that he had been here before. He knew that this dungeon would be discovered in another 10 years, but he was certain that it would be completely empty by then. Right now, however, he could feel the mana beneath the rotten surface. Vicar cautiously approached the dungeon. He looked around, but he didn't see any light, and he realized that the dungeon must be deeper than he initially thought. But Vicar was undaunted. His crimson eyes glowed with excitement as he stepped inside the dungeon. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of treasures were waiting for him inside. Thanks for watching the video. The next part will be added here once it's uploaded. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. Also, don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you're always the first to know when I post something new.